And here I've been talking about how you and I have to accept the Sox will be trading Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert Jr. And now it appears that neither is going to be traded. I'll discuss why next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Make sure to turn on those notifications as well. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, on the day former Sox ace Dylan Cease throws a no-hitter, the New York Post's John Heyman tweeted out that Garrett Crochet does not want to go to the bullpen for any contender that may trade for him. And if he's going to pitch in October, he wants an extension from that potential trade partner. This is on top of the Athletics' Ken Rosenthal's report on Wednesday that the Sox may just keep Crochet and try to flip him in the offseason. He, along with Patrick Mooney and Will Salmon, they reported yesterday that his trade market has heavy concerns around the price to get him relative to what his role will be and his desire for a contract extension. So I'll discuss why it is smart for Crochet to take that stance, along with how that can renew some hope to get him signed to an extension with the Sox in the offseason. However, I also want to discuss a concern I have when I read Heyman's follow-up report on Crochet's demands that mentions the Sox possibly not trading Erick Fedde. Oh, and while you and I were sleeping, the Tampa Bay Rays, they traded Randy Arozarena to the Seattle Mariners, which takes the best trade partner for Luis Robert Jr. off the board. Or maybe it does not. So we'll discuss that also in the first segment. Then Cease, he threw a no-no for the San Diego Padres yesterday. He's another former Sox pitcher thriving elsewhere. I want to discuss the alternate reality where if the Sox still had Cease, would they be any better than they are right now? And maybe go one step further. Would they be competitive if they still had, like, say, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, and Cease? And then finally, instead of discussing how the Sox got swept by the Rangers or will probably lose more games than the Mariners this weekend like I had planned, I want to address Eloy Jimenez's lack of effort yesterday and how that was insulting to us. Well, SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. I think three things I want to make clear about Crochet, LRJ, and Erick Fedde's trade rumors and their trade market. First, I'll dive into all the details in a moment, but good for Garrett Crochet for taking a stand and demanding to get paid from any contender that acquires him. All these contenders are questioning if he can physically hold up this season and what his role will be. But on the flip side, Garrett is being a businessman, realizing you're right. If all these concerns, like if my arm breaks down, my career earnings are going to be next to nothing. I'm taking a lot of risk too here. So I better be compensated for it because he's only making $800K this year. However, I am worried when John Heyman writes, this is what he wrote: the White Sox are telling folks they won't trade Erick Fedde unless they are bowled over. He's a value play at $7.5 million. And I get he's under team control for next season, but it's only one more season, and it's a season where you're going to still be bad, and you do need to eventually open up some rotation spots for some of those young arms you have coming up. And if you do want to be competitive by, say, 2026, you need to get some bats in the system quickly. And if you're not trading Crochet, and I'll get to Luis Robert Jr. in a second, Fedde's value can at least maybe net one or two potentially impactful bats. So try to be blown away and understand that his value is going to be a little less in the offseason because he is going to be in his 30s and he would have 1 year left on his deal. You know, that might get you a prospect in the team's 10 to 15 range compared to a team's 5 to 10 ranking right now. And finally, I don't think the Sox missed the boat on the Mariners. Clearly, the Mariners assessed the trade market and decided not to pay a boatload of prospects. So it does take two parties to make a deal. So if Seattle wanted to trade lower rated prospects for a 29-year-old slugger, fine. Although the MLB.com story on the trade has the Mariners still looking for bats, So maybe the door isn't slammed shut, and I'll get to that in just in a second. But I want to first address, you think I'm might be a politician with how much I've gone back and forth on trading Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert Jr. So again, I want to make it clear. Let me make my stance clear. In my heart, I want Crochet and LRJ to stay. Let's build the next great rotation around Crochet. And while I don't think Robert Jr. is a foundational bat, he can definitely be a sidekick bat to whoever the Sox can develop into that foundational bat of a lineup. And think about it, the rotation has a chance to be great with Crochet here. You could have next season, potentially, you could have a rotation of Crochet, Drew Thorpe, top pitching prospect Noah Schultz, first round pick Hagen Smith, and Jonathan Cannon. And Jonathan Cannon had a really good outing yesterday. And that is 3 power lefties and 2 righties who can spin the ball. That Sox pitching guru, Brian Bannister, is preaching can be effective at guaranteed rate field. And I started the week by saying, yeah, we have to come to accept that trading Crochet along with Luis Robert Jr. is probably the only way to get the promising bats who can project to be impactful and possibly foundational. So, that's kind of where my stance is. But again, I don't think we have to worry about this anymore because unless Bob Nightingale chimes in on Sunday with the Sox official stance, right now, John Heyman, the Athletic Ken's Rosenthals, and even ESPN's Jesse Rogers is making it seem clear trading Crochet right now is probably not in the cards. So here's Heyman's tweet. This is what he put at John Heyman about 18 hours ago. Garrett Crochet plan with the White Sox is to pitch normal workload as starter until the end of the regular season. If traded, would need extension to pitch in October. He won't move to the bullpen and will not take any break. Views starter routine as best for health. Then here is Rosenthal explaining the difficulty of a contender, meeting the demand of maybe a Garrett Crochet contract extension and the White Sox trade demands. This is what he writes. It's entirely possible that a team that acquires Crochet would want to sign him to a contract extension anyway. It would certainly be in the club's best interest to make sure that he's comfortable and effective through at least the next 2 pennant races as well. But finding the right value on a trade package and signing him to a long-term deal becomes increasingly difficult if it's unclear whether he'll be able to pitch in October. And then ESPN's Jesse Rogers, he did tweet it out that this is Crochet's stance, not his representation. But he did have this in his write-up blurb later. Teams interested in Crochet include the Dodgers, Orioles, and Yankees, though the latter team might have already bowed out of the running according to league sources. So if that's the case, you might as well keep Crochet, especially when you can use that to erase all doubt around him and make another run at maybe an extension. Because again, you're only going to have, if you don't trade Luis Robert Jr., you're only going to have 2 guaranteed contracts on the books next season. Benintendi's and Luis Robert Jr.'s. And I believe that adds up to like $32 million. So you do have money to spend. Although we don't know how much Jerry Reinsdorf is going to allow Chris Getz to spend. Sorry about that. And okay, if you can't meet his extension demands, then you can move him like you did with Cease. Now on to Robert Jr. The Mariners did not pay a huge price for Arozarena. The Mariners gave up outfielder Aiden Smith, the number 12 prospect among the Mariners' top 30, right-handed pitcher Brody Hopkins, number 22, and a player to be named later. Now, that does not mean the Mariners are done according to MLB.com. This is what they had in their write-up. The Mariners might not be done during this deadline season, parting with Smith, who's been raking in the minors, and Hopkins, who the club was very high on, still kept the top of its farm system intact, with plenty more to deal from. Headlining that group is catcher Harry Ford, Seattle's number 2 prospect, and MLB Pipeline's number 23 overall. Ideally, they add another impact bat. Behind the scenes, Seattle's front office has been steadfast about aggressively improving the club, even on the heels of a dramatic fall from grace, 9-20 since that 10-game lead, and gut-punching injuries this week to stalwarts J.P. Crawford, out 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured right pinky, and Julio Rodriguez, whose timeline is TBD with a high ankle sprain. The Mariners' main priority, even after parting with first baseman Ty France earlier this week, have been to acquire an outfielder to augment a crowded yet underachieving group. Rodriguez is the mainstay long-term, and Luke Raley, who also acquired from Tampa Bay in January, has been one of the best acquisitions from last offseason. So obviously, for the crowd wanting to trade Luis Robert Jr. to the Mariners, there's still hope. However, the return might just be 3 players. So that's what the Rays got for an all-star player. Now, granted, Randy is 29, so I would assume the return for a younger LRJ with 3 years of club control would be maybe 3 higher ranked prospects. And the Mariners got those guys, those hitters like, Ford, a couple of other young hitters. But, maybe the Mariners might say, we're going to go with a different team. And that's what gets me worried. Chris Getz is setting the price maybe too high on his 3 best trade chips. And yes, you want max return for Crochet, Robert, and Fedde, but they all have question marks. And yes, it is a seller's market, but you're seeing an example of a contender pivot to other options. And I think Fedde is the one trade chip you have to move since he's over 30 and will only have 1 more year of club control. And right now, a contender can at least potentially get 2 Octobers out of him. And even if they fall out of contention, say next year, they could potentially flip them at the deadline to recoup some of their losses. But saying you don't have to trade Fedde, yeah, it's true. But if you want to speed up the return to great timeline, you want to do that as soon as you can. So even getting 100% return or even 90%, as long as it's a high potential bat, it might be worth at least moving Fedde right now. Well, speaking of pitchers who have been traded, the Sox moved Dylan Cease during spring training. He just threw a no-hitter for the Padres. Let's discuss the alternate reality of him still being here next on Locked On White Sox. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rivals' U.S. cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. The Sox and the San Francisco Giants are not exactly rivals, but they will be foes next month when Chicago travels there in mid-August. And as I keep saying, why not take a trip out to San Francisco, check out Fisherman's Wharf, Alcatraz, the Golden Gate Bridge, get some amazing food in Chinatown, then taking a game that in that amazing ballpark. Always wanted to see historic Fenway Park. I know I have. The Sox will be in Boston in September, so use Booking.com to find a place to lay your head if you want to make those trips. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And FanDuel is great for props and parlays. For example, rooting for ties might not be much fun, but when it's at plus 410 for the first 5 innings result, being the Sox and the Mariners all square tonight, that's a chance to say, if you put $10 on that, you can turn that into $41. And you can even bet the game to go into extra innings. And if it goes to 10 innings, that line is at plus 720. And look, I may not like the Manfred runner, but a chance to turn $10 into 72 if it goes extras, it's the one way I can live with that silly rule. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis and news, opinions and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox start a 3-game home series against the Seattle Mariners tonight. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, and thank you for making the show your first listen. Again, lots of great White Sox podcasts out there. Sorry, I just got to take a sip of my tea. I just ask you make me your first listen. And actually, I'm not really drinking tea. It's more of a hot honey and lemon drink that was recommended by a doctor. Again, I still just cannot kick this cough. Whatever plague I catched just will not go away. But but at least I get to go see the ENT and see what's wrong with my ears. And the hearing has at least returned for those concerned about me. All right, anyways, this is a hill that I'm going to die on. And I'm going to take some slinging arrows. But I don't think it's fair to slam the organization for all these pitchers, former pitchers, thriving elsewhere. And look, I get the Sox have lost all credibility. But thinking Ronaldo Lopez would thrive as a starter when he failed twice is missing the context that some guys just need a fresh start. Some guys may need a different voice. And that doesn't have the Sox logo on it. And also, Ronaldo was an effective reliever for the team. And he was traded to the Angels, and you got a promising young catcher in Edgar Caro. So it's not like they didn't get anything out of him. And Chris Sale, the previous leadership, tried. Well, it was bad tries, but to build a winning team around him, and it just did not work out. And then the farm system was too depleted, and the team had to move the best asset to kickstart a rebuild. And it did yield a division title. The Sox did win a division title with Yoan Moncada and Michael Kopech. The problem is the failure to win a playoff game or a World Series and then just watch the rebuild collapse so quickly, and especially see Moncada's career ruined by injuries and Kopech, basically just be this total inconsistent mess, is what I think blurs our vision of when Sale was being traded. And it also blurs the context that makes watching Sale's revival in Atlanta so hard. So I get it, but you can't just throw that on the White Sox. And Cease, well, he's back to being Cy Cease in San Diego after he was traded in spring training. And he finally got that no-hitter yesterday against the Nationals, and he was so strong, he was hitting 99 in the ninth. I caught a few innings on the MLB TV before I switched over, regrettably, to the White Sox game. And man, his stuff was just outstanding. That slider was sliding. Oh, slider, oh, slide. That's an underrated poem that he wrote, by the way. But guess what? Him on the Sox this year, if we went into the alternate reality, if we found a way to get into the multiverse, him on the Sox this year probably has them still on the trajectory to being the worst team ever, at least in franchise history. Maybe the team has a few more wins, but they're probably still in the 60-loss range. Why? Well, the starting pitching has not been the problem this season. It's the one ray of sunshine we have. You have a few bad Chris Flexen outings sometimes, but for the most part, when you turn on a White Sox game, the first 6 innings are at least fun to watch. And then the bullpen takes over. And then it's terrible. It's the hitting, the defense, the bad base running, the bullpen, the terrible manager. That is what is killing this team. That is what has this team 50 games under 500. Now, if Cease was still here, maybe they are 40 games under 500. Or I'd put maybe 45 games under 500. Now, if you want to be upset that the Sox didn't even try to extend Cease, then I get that, and I'm with you. And one reason the Sox keep shipping off these pitchers is there's never really any interest in keeping these pitchers beyond their club control years. And I get that. That is totally frustrating. It'd be great for this franchise to just accept the risk that pitchers might get hurt, but you still got to pay them. The Dodgers do, and they keep making it to October. Yankees take the risk. Heck, they have Carlos Rodon. Guy always has arm issues. He's been inconsistent this year. But he was another pitcher the Sox drafted and developed and then just let walk away. Although, there was the injury risks. But this franchise ignores that also carries the risk of a replacement player not developing, because I think they just believe, at least the owner believes that, hey, we'll just replace him with a younger, cheaper guy. And I get it, but it totally takes out if you put that in the black and white, you're totally taking out the context of that replacement player not developing into an effective starter, i.e. look at Lopez's failure. Or how about Carson Fulmer not developing? Or you also have to look into account the longer timeline like Rodon. Yes, injuries played in a role into his longer timeline to develop, but Just some guys need some time. And that can really impact how competitive you are. And if you're constantly rebuilding your rotation, you are then constantly rebuilding. And I get the cynicism and the sarcasm when fans say, hey, great, the Sox drafted Hagen Smith. Can't wait until he's traded in 4 years, because, again, they just don't seem to be interested to making that commitment. The last time I think the Sox really committed to a pitcher was Mark Burley, and that's because he had a rubber arm. Now, at least the Sox look like they will benefit from this deal, too. Drew Thorpe is on a great career trajectory. Jairo Iriarte projects to at least be a very good bullpen arm. And he can be, if he reaches his ceiling, that's a very good starter. So I think all parties involved made out pretty well. And sometimes it is true, it can be true that both teams can win a trade. And it also can be true that, you could really love Dylan Cease and be very happy for him in San Diego, just like me. And you can also, it's true, even though I have a stance, but I see your point, that you can love Dylan Cease and just be so upset that the Sox keep trading away really great players. But anyways, congrats to Cease on finally getting that no-hitter. If he had done that yesterday wearing a Sox uniform, well, he probably just would have made his trade value that much higher. Because, again, the Sox would be going nowhere with Cease on this team. Eloy Jimenez, he came to the Sox in the same trade that got the franchise Dylan Cease, but Eloy's career has been full of injuries. But getting hurt, hey, it might not be his fault, but it's still very frustrating to see him always get hurt. But his lack of hustle and lack of putting the ball in the air is what basically cost the Sox yesterday. And I'll discuss why that is shameful next on Locked On White Sox. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple clicks at supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get an industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free Trade Master program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. And the White Sox start a 3-game home series against the Seattle Mariners tonight. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for sticking with me this long. Shout out to all my everydayers. Again, great discussions on the YouTube community page. Love talking to all you guys. Shout out to my guy Maverick. Always a good discussion. All right, anyways, Frank Thomas in the postgame show rightfully laid into Eloy Jimenez after yesterday's game. And heck, there's a great rant from Herb Lawrence on the CHGO White Sox podcast about Eloy Jimenez. And you might be wondering, why is Eloy getting, this scorn? He's always hurt. It's very easy to pick on Eloy. Well, what Eloy did yesterday in the top of the 7th is absolutely shameful. And is another example of why it will be a good day once the Sox decline his option. Top of the 7th, 1 out. Eloy actually put the ball in the air. Shocking. Wasn't very high in the air, but went to the outfield and actually dropped for what Eloy probably thought was a single. But for how much it hung in the air, it was kind of one of those middle fly balls and how it was played off a bounce. If Eloy's hustling, he probably makes it into second for a double. Now, obviously, Eloy is probably still hurt. And that probably made him realize he didn't need to hustle. But when he didn't really hustle out of the box, and then when he decided, or when the first base coach said go for second, it was too late. Dead to rights, out at second. And what hurts is the next at bat, Paul DeYoung singles, and that could have tied the ball game. Instead, Nick Senzel eventually makes out number 3, and the Sox have no runs and they lose 2-1. And if you want to see Frank Thomas's criticism along with Ozzie Guillen's, good rant is on at NBC White Sox on X, formerly Twitter. And he made a good point. If Eloy can't run the bases because he's still hurt, then he should be on the IL. He shouldn't even be here. So that's the one thing that I can't hold against Eloy. Although I can, because again, the rumored speculation, James Fegan had that on the Sox Machine podcast a few weeks ago, was it's Eloy driving coming back. He wants to show teams that he can play through these injuries because he's showcasing himself. But he isn't doing a good job of showcasing himself. He isn't putting the ball in the air. He has a 61.4% ground ball percentage, and he's supposed to be a slugger. And he's still putting the ball on the ground. He has 5 home runs and a 347 slugging percentage. And he was supposed to be projected to have a 447 slugging percentage according to Fangraphs. He is a minus 0.4 F4 player. And I get he's still probably hurt. And that's probably not allowing him to really drive the ball. But you still, if you're choosing to be out there, even at 80, 85%, then you got to give 100% of that 85%. Scott Steiner math, I know. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, just tune into Bernstein and Holmes. They usually play that Scott Steiner promo from TNA where he was just making all these crazy maths about winning a match. Anyways, really, Eloy should be doing what Yoan Moncada is doing and just accept you're getting nothing more than a 1-year prove-it deal next season, so just shut it down. Or if you are going to return, do it when you actually are feeling 100%. 100%. And really, neither should be playing unless they're 100% because it's a lost season. You are 50 games under 500. Having Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez is not in the lineup is not going to change that. Especially we have Eloy Jimenez and he's not putting the ball in the air. It's a historically bad season. None of these guys are going to be here next year. They've got no trade value. There's just no reason to have Eloy in the lineup if he can't run the bases. And the thing is, okay, if Eloy thought that it was a single, just stay at first base then. You know, that might be on coaching if they're saying, hey, yeah, take 2. No, put the hold sign up. Because he can barely run. He looks like a wounded animal out there. And, you know, hey, I appreciate him gutting it out, but if he's not capable of at least giving a maximum effort, then get him on the IL. You know, Gavin Sheets can continue to make outs at DH. You know, and I if I were the GM, I would say to Eloy, you're going back on the 10-day IL, especially for that bad effort. You're still under contract, so you can go to the Arizona facility and rehab all you want until until we decline your option. You know, you can get ready for your next team, but otherwise, we're done here. We wish you luck on your future endeavors. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. But before I go, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll be back on Monday to discuss if any trades happened over the weekend, or at the very least, what the heck happened to the Sox over the weekend. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding Garrett Crochet, Luis Robert Jr.'s, and Erick Fedde's recent trade market updates and how Crochet and LRJ and maybe even Fedde aren't going anywhere. Then we'll talk about you can leave comments about the alternate reality where Dylan Cease is still in the Sox and probably not making a difference. And you can also leave comments about Eloy Jimenez's lack of effort yesterday. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. See you Monday.